Today we'll show you some tips and tricks in soldering your wires, and in this case specifically how to put the heat shrink tubing inside the wires when you already solder the wire. I'm also going to show you how to insert this wire onto the XT60 connector when the hole on the back of the connector here is smaller than the wire. But first, let me show you something very important and most fundamental when you're soldering, is how to hold your soldering iron, because I see people hold their soldering iron like this. Ouch! If it smells like chicken, you're holding it wrong. First of all, let me show you how to put in the heat shrink tubing onto the wire to insulate the wire when you already soldered the wire on here and you forgot to put in the tubing first before you solder the wire. So how you thread this small tubing through here, because this is way too big for the tubing. One solution is to desolder this wire and remove it out of this connector, and then you put your tubing in first and then you resolder this wire on here. But I cannot do that in this case, and that's because the hole on the back of the connector here is way too small. It barely fits the wire on here. I can barely squeeze it in there, and that's without the solder. And now when it already has the solder, it's nearly impossible to squeeze the wire onto the hole. And therefore, if I desolder this wire and remove it, I cannot reuse this connector anymore. I have to use a new connector. Usually with this wire, this is size 10 by the way, I use a smaller heat shrink tubing, and this is just a little bigger than the wire. But in this case, I'm going to use a much bigger heat shrink tubing. This heat shrink tubing shrinks when you heat it up, but a lot of people don't know is that you can also expand it when you stretch it out. And the size of this tubing is about 12 millimeter. So what I'm going to do is to stretch this out so that it will be big enough to go through the XT60 connector here. I'm going to use a pair of needle nose pliers and try to stretch it out like that. Spin around so that it will be evenly on all sides, just like that. And try not to stretch it too much, otherwise it will break. So just be patient. It will eventually be big enough. Here you go. After just a few minutes, it's this big. That is the original size. You can see it's about twice the original size. The original size was 12 millimeter. Now it's 24. So it's exactly double the size. This heat shrink, when it shrinks, it will shrink down to half the size. But as you can see, you can also stretch it to double the size. You can also see the discoloration of the tubing when it's stretched out. And now I should be able to squeeze it through here very easily, just like that. Now let's see if it would shrink down properly if we heat it up. And voila! That's how to put a small heat shrink tubing through a larger opening. Isn't that beautiful? Here's my next tip. I'm going to show you how to solder a wire onto an XT60 connector that is a little bit too small. Over here I have size 10 stranded copper wire, and it can barely fit in here. Actually, it does not fit in here. I cannot push it all the way in. And there are actually a few solutions to this. The first and the easiest one is to use a solid copper wire instead. And this is size 10 also, and it's the same gauge as the stranded copper wire. And it is smaller, so it would fit in here just fine like that. The problem with this is that the solid copper wire is too stiff and it's not flexible. So it's not very useful in many applications. So my second solution is to make this hole bigger by using a drill. and this bit is size 7/64. I'm just gonna put it in here and just drill. Sometimes when you drill this will spin around and makes it less effective. So I use a pair of pliers and hold it on this side, and that will stop it from spinning. Now let's give it a try. Fit perfectly in there. So now we can solder this, but first I'm gonna dip it in my flux liquid. Now put right back in. It needs flux, otherwise it'll be very hard to solder. Before I solder this in, I'm going to use another connector and connect this on the other side. And this acts as a heat sink to withdraw heat from this connector here, otherwise it's going to be too hot and melt the plastic. And now we just solder in. Here we go. It's nice and solid. And don't forget the heat shrink tubing. And here's my last solution, and we don't have to use a drill for this one. I'm going to dip it in here first. Now I'm going to try and push this wire in, but because the whole thing won't fit in this hole, I'm going to peel off some of the strands, probably 3 or 4 strands, before I push it in. Now the wire is smaller and it should fit in here, just like that. Now I'm going to cut these 4 strands so that when I bend it back down, it will reach the top part of the metal here. Just like that. That's what it looks like. So now if I solder everything together, I'm not losing any strands at all. All of the strands are connected together if I solder them together. Now we can solder it all together. So I'm just gonna leave my tips on here, and when it's hot enough, the solder will melt and flow right into the connector. Just like that. Beautiful. Here it is. It's beautiful. So there you have it. Just a few tips on how to solder your wires on XT60 connectors. But this would apply to many other applications as well, not just the XT60 connectors. That's all I have for now, folks. Thanks for watching. See you next time.